Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh. Let me introduce myself. My name is Rifqi. My student ID is 24507-0107-141009. My study program is medicine from the Faculty of Medicine from the Brawijaya University. So, this is my resume regarding the use of cadavers in medical practice. So, the study of medical science is very necessary with interaction with the cadaver because with cadaver we can have so many action and also getting new knowledge, because in our practice as a medical professionals we also can have direct contact with human. So it is very important for a medical student to study from the cadavers so they could know the real explanation and the real example of the human body itself. There are a lot of procedures and also practice that we can learn from the cadavers, such as surgical procedure, organ analysis, and other related application. So, from the historical perspective, surgical procedure on cadavers represent a relatively new practice that did not exist during the time of the Prophet Muhammad SAW, nor even for centuries thereafter. Therefore, it is very understandable that classical Islamic jurisprudential do not contain explicit discussion on the permissibility of dissecting cadaver for educational purposes. Consequently, these issues fall under contemporary jurisprudential matters that require direct legal assessment by qualified scholars through the study of Islamic legal evidence. In other words, when examining this issue, our primary reference should be the fatwas of contemporary scholars rather than the juristic discussion of past scholars. By analyzing fatwas issued by contemporary scholars regarding this matter, we can develop a clear understanding of the Islamic legal stance on the use of cadavers in an ethical purpose. Okay, so one of the main points that we should be consider is the first one is the dignity of the disease. Since when we use cadaver to learning, sometimes we have to dissect, and sometimes we see the cadaver as a nude person. So of course, we should consider regarding the dignity of the disease. So this is the one of the main primary legal concern regarding the dissection of cadavers. In Islam stems from the religious injunction to uphold the dignity of the deceased. Several scriptural evidence emphasize the necessity of respecting human beings both in life and after life. So, as a human being, we have to respect someone's dignity in their life when they're still living and after their death. Among this evidence is the following Quranic verse. Walaqad karamna Bismillahirrahmanirrahim. Walaqad karamna bani Adam wa hamalnahum fi barri wal bahri wa razaqnahum min at-tayyibati wa faddalnahum ala kathirin mimman khalaqna tafdila. And the meaning is, indeed we have honored the children of Adam and carried them on land and sea, provided them a good sustenance, and favored them over many our creation with a marked distinction. So, based on this verse, Allah affirms that human beings are the most honored of His creation. So we have to apply this privilege during their lifetime and after their passing. Among the forms of the respect due to the deceased are the rites of washing, shrouding, performing the funeral prayer, and then burying with dignity. Moreover, honoring the deceased includes keeping from any form of bodily harm of discretion. The Prophet Muhammad SAW emphasized the sanctity of the deceased by equating the breaking of a dead person's bones with that of a living person. This comparison signifies that the dignity of the deceased must be preserved just as the dignity of the living is upheld. This is supported by a hadith narrated by Abu Nawawi. Ibn Hajar also reaffirmed this conclusion by asserting that a believer's honor remains intact after death, just as it was during their lifetime. Another key of evidence that emphasizes the obligation to preserve the dignity of deceased is the prohibition of mutilation mutla. When Prophet Muhammad SAW appointed a military commander, One of his instructions was to avoid mutilating enemy corpses. This prohibition reflects that it is that Islam is really having a high integrity regarding respecting the dignity of the deceased, so they are prohibiting any mutilation. Even for the example, even when it is the body of the enemy. Okay, the Prophet Muhammad SAW also prohibited sitting on graves, as doing so would cause harm to the deceased. This prohibition strongly indicates that the dignity of the deceased is akin to that of the living. The Prophet Muhammad SAW further emphasized this prohibition by stating that sitting on burning embers will with until one's clothes and skin are burned is preferable sitting on grave. After all the evidence that emphasize the obligation to respect the dignity of the deceased, making it the default ruling in Islamic law. So, respect the dignity of the deceased is one of the main essential part as a Muslim. If we take look back based on the example that has been given. In other words, this contextual evidence affirms that maintaining the sanctity of the deceased is a religious obligation, and consequently, discrediting a corpse is categorically prohibited. So that is the first point. First one is the respecting the dignity of the deceased. So for the second point is exceptional circumstances. So while in the default condition, like we have been mentioned before, it is like a basic circumstances. So there is exceptional circumstances. So while the default ruling requires the preservation of corpse dignity, certain exceptional permit this kind of mutilation or dissection when it serves to have a greater benefit than in a regular condition. One such example is the permissibility of executing criminals through mutilation to deter acts of violence robbery. Although mutilation is originally is very prohibited, but in order to give punishment to someone to do bad, for example, from stealing, it is not prohibited. And this acceptable. This one fundamental is implied by Prophet Muhammad SAW against a group of robbers from the tribes of Uki or Uraina, in which their hands and feet were amputated and their eyes were gouged out. The Quran itself permits crucifixion and the amputation of hands and feet in a crosswise manner as a punishment for highway robbers, which is also a form of mutilation. Similarly, classical jurists, or we all know as fuqaha, have outlined exceptions to the default ruling of preserving the dignity of deceased when confronted with a situation where a greater benefit outweighs the obligation to honor the dead. One such case is the permissibility of performing a caesarean section on a deceased pregnant woman if the fetus is still alive or is expected to survive. The general ruling prohibiting dissecting a corpse, but since preserving life of a life being is greater priority, performing such a procedure become permissible. So, if there is some exceptional circumstance, for example, in order to save another life, it has a lot of more benefits to do this kind of action like mutilation and etc. So it is okay if we have a better purpose with the better benefits to do this kind of mutilation. Okay. Another exception, the permissibility of dismembering a fetus inside the deceased mother womb if it's necessary to save mother's life. The default ruling prohibits mutilation, but since preserving the mother's life is greater of importance, such an action is allowed. So, like what I've said before, if we have better purposes, for example, in saving life, or maybe in saving someone's life, or even mother and also the fetus life, it is allowed to do mutilation or dissection to human. Another example is the permissibility of consuming human flesh in extreme situation to prevent death from starvation. Eating human flesh is inherently prohibited as it involves mutilation and consumption of a body must be honored. However, due to the overriding necessity of preserving life, consuming the flesh of a deceased person in dire circumstances is permitted. Another case where autopsy is permitted is when a deceased individual has unlawfully acquired property. The default ruling prohibits dissecting a corpse as it constitutes mutilation. However, given the greater benefit, namely returning rightful property to its owner and fulfilling the command to prevent the waste of wealth, performing such an autopsy becomes very permissible. Based on the example that we've been talking before, dissecting cadaver for medical training is deemed permissible due to the overwhelming benefits that outweigh the preservation of the deceased dignity. The benefits derived from training skilled doctors to contribute to preservation of thousands or even million patients. I like what I've said before. We are allowed to do dissection if we have a greater benefits. Like when a medical student learn with a when a medical student learn with a cadaver, of course it will not this I'm not it will have a greater benefits because during learning in the by cadaver during learning new medical practicals by using cadaver, a lot of medical students can perform a medical practice in the future. That of course that will help a million, a thousand patient. In addition to its permissibility as a medical training tool, autopsy is allowed for forensic purposes such as determining the cause of death and uncovering criminal acts. Likewise, autopsy may be performed to study disease found in the deceased with the goal of preventing similar illness from affecting others. Numerous scrolls have been issued during permitting the use of cadavers for educational purposes. Among them are Yusuf Ad-Dajwi, Hasnain Makhluf, Ibrahim Al-Yaqubi, Muhammad Sa'id Ramadan Al-Bauti, Muhammad Nazim Nasimi, and Mahmud Ali As-Saratawi. Among others, several fatwa councils that permitted. There is also several fatwa councils that have also permitted these practices. However, when performing a dissection, several ethical guidelines must be observed. So the first one is the consent requirement, the second one is necessity-based dissection, the third one is respect for the deceased, and the fourth one is proper burial. After dissection, the remains must be buried in accordance with Islamic funeral rites. So, for the last part is scholars who hold a differing opinion. Several scholars disagree with the previously mentioned justification. They firmly prohibit autopsy for any purposes, arguing it violates the dignity of deceased. So, among those who hold this view are Muhammad Bakhit, Al-Muti'i, Bu'ayat Al-Tawbahi, Muhammad Burhanuddin, Asumbuli, Hasan bin Al-As-Saqaf, Muhammad Abdul Wahhab Buhairi, Khalid bin Abdullah Al-Marsalih, and others. So that's all my oral resume from the material. Thank you. Assalamualaikum warahmatullahi wabarakatuh.